Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Welcome to the Paul Lovette Show. I am your host, Paul Lovette, a proud and unapologetic Black American conservative. Today, I am taking a look at the quadruple murderer, Bryan Kohberger. Our value proposition for today is to take a deep dive into the coward Kohberger's plea deal with the prosecution to avoid the death penalty for killing 4 young University of Idaho students. You are going to get to hear the voice of a killer who shows zero remorse for cutting short the lives of 4 bright-eyed young college students with promising futures ahead of them. At the time of the killings, Bryan Kohberger was a 28-year-old Criminology PhD student. He had an academic and personal background focused on criminology and psychology. Kohberger's undergraduate degrees were in criminology and psychology. His former classmates also described him as someone who often engaged in classroom discussions, and he was known for his interest in the psychology of crime. Now, let's take a look at the plea agreement. Here, the judge lays out the terms of the agreement.
I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates, in sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing, to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35.
So to be clear, Kohberger is admitting to guilt for all 5 counts: burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder. He will receive the maximum sentence for each count, and he will not be able to ask the court for any leniency or appeal his case now or in the future. To my surprise, crazy people were apparently calling the judge and leaving messages telling him how he should conduct himself. Apparently, these messages were forwarded to security, and where appropriate, they were forwarded to law enforcement. So there must have been threats against the judge in this matter.
A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. I have not read any of the numerous messages, nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance, if I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea.
What this tells me is that some people have no concept of a judicial system having impartial decision-making and due process for all individuals, regardless of their status, wealth, race, or background. Also, that includes the defendant and the victims. Clearly, these crazies are products of Hollywood's portrayal of the judicial system. As the judge stated, his role is very limited. He can only accept the plea deal or reject the plea deal, and that is based on very specific circumstances. Next, I want to get to the ice coldness of Kohberger, as I think of his dead eyes in many of the pictures we have seen on the television. It is also important that we remember his victims whose lives were stolen. In this video, the judge asked Kohberger directly for each count if he committed the crime. Notice his simple and matter-of-fact responses.
Let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Madison Mogen was a senior at the University of Idaho, where she majored in marketing. Her parents accepted a bachelor's degree in marketing on her behalf posthumously. Madison was from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, was a member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority along with Zena Kernodle. She and Zena worked together at the Mad Greek restaurant in downtown Moscow. Madison used her marketing skills to manage the restaurant's social media. She and Kaylee Goncalves had been best friends since junior high. Madison had planned to move to Boise after graduation.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Kaylee Goncalves. Kaylee was a 21-year-old senior at the University of Idaho, majoring in general studies. Kaylee was a member of the Alpha Phi sorority. She and Madison Mogen were longtime best friends. In an Instagram post from Madison's 21st birthday, Kaylee wrote, "I wouldn't have wanted anyone else to be the main character in all of my childhood stories." After graduation, she planned to take a trip to Europe and intended to move to Texas, where she had a job lined up.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Xana Kernodle. Xana was a 20-year-old junior at the University of Idaho and was majoring in marketing. Originally from Avondale, Arizona, Xana later lived in Post Falls, Idaho. She was a member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority with Madison Mogen. She was dating Ethan Chapin. Her older sister, Jasmine, described her as someone who was so positive, funny, and was loved by everyone she met.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Ethan Chapin. Ethan was a 20-year-old freshman at the University of Idaho, majoring in sports management. Ethan was from Conway, Washington, was a triplet, and attended the University of Idaho with his 2 siblings. He was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity and was dating Zena Kernodle. His former coach remembered him as someone who lit up many of my dark days. It just makes my blood boil to think of these young college students being murdered by this monster, and his cold and callous replies to the judge's questions. These kids had dreams and aspirations. They had a lifetime of chasing their dreams, marrying, and having and enjoying grandchildren for themselves and their parents. Their families will never get to share the ups and downs, the many joys and triumphs, so many treasured holidays and life moments taken by this monster.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Has anyone, other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
I want to make the point to anyone that questions the quality of our judicial system or that Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes. The judge leaves no stone unturned in the prior 4 videos, ensuring that Kohberger knows completely and without reservation what he did. The judge also makes sure that he was not being forced to make the agreement and that he has had every question explained to him and answered by his attorneys. And finally, he asks Kohberger if he is making this plea because he believes it is in his best interest, to which Kohberger answers yes. So we know that Kohberger has received a fair and unbiased judicial due process and that he confessed to the murders of these 4 young college students. Now, let's hear the complete timeline from that horrific day back on November 13th, 2022. This day ends with 4 innocent college students, these 4 college students, in their beds and unfortunately culminating with their murder by a psychopathic PhD criminology student, Bryan Kohberger.
The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was the traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include at trial video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway just across the state line from Moscow that would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. The defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Kernodle was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the third floor, it was on the second floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were two other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walenta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And The evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court, in public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, in those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Kernodle. Thank you.
Thank you. Committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered.
Our hearts and prayers go out to these families. No words that I could possibly say would take away any of this pain. But I do pray you can and have found a measure of comfort and acceptance. And know that the Lord God is with you before, during, and after this tragedy. Pray to Him, cry to Him, cling to Him, and take comfort in Him. I am Paul Lovette, and this is the Paul Lovette Show.